Hey, everybody. Welcome to this month's Azure Container Apps community live stream. I'm joined by Mike and Carrie today, and we have a lot of things to talk about in the show. So you all want to say hi, and then we're going to jump right into it.
Sure. Good morning. Hi, I'm Mike. Great to join you today, or have you join us. And yeah, we got some great news to share. Thanks for showing up.
Yep. Hi guys, it's Carrie again. Super excited to give some demos today and talk about what's up and coming and new in container apps.
Awesome. Yeah, so we have lots going on. So I'm going to quickly go through some community highlights as well as product news. And then we're going to jump into the bigger product news and talk about some new stuff that we just announced this week with a lot of demos and just a lot of excitement and happiness and
fun. Lots of fun.
Fun. That's the word. All right, so let's get into it. So another thing that we're starting this month, and hopefully we'll do this every month, and if it doesn't happen, it'll be my fault, so you can send me emails, is that we're going to try to, well, we will publish a monthly blog post and actually round up all the different community highlights, like basically all the links and video, like all the blog posts and videos that you've all been kind of producing. We want to kind of share with everybody there, as well as we want to kind of have one place where you can find out about all the things that are happening with the product in the past month all in one place. So this blog post will be that. So if you want to, so we're actually going to try to share this link. So go to aka.ms/container-apps/newsletter. You can go there and follow along with us, and you can also subscribe to not just this blog post here, but you can also subscribe to the blog itself, and I think you'll get notified whenever there's new blog posts here, including our newsletters. There you go. All right, so let's get into it. So I'm just going to go and walk through a bunch of really exciting community highlights that that we kind of came across in the last month. So the first one here is it's a .NET workshop for container apps. This is hot off the press. I had a chat with the folks that put this together last week, and they said they literally just finished it. So yeah, so if you want to walk through container apps and with .NET and understand how to deploy your app to container apps, go through this this workshop. And I'm just going to go and click open all of these. I should have done this ahead of time. And then we'll just go through each one. So so it's something that we'll be talking about a little bit later. Actually, maybe not today. Is that Azure Spring Apps now has a new consumption plan. And when you go and create Azure Spring Apps in a consumption plan, it actually deploys the apps to an Azure Container App environment. So so you kind of get the scale to zero that you get with container apps, but you also now get that with Spring Apps because it's running on Azure Container Apps. Whoa, and this thing actually played the video. So and another one here is that recently we had a learn live on how to choose between the different Azure container options. So this is a really good place to go and check out. And they talk about how like the different container services that we have in Azure, and the reasons why you might choose one over another. And I think this just happened just this past morning, like a couple hours ago, which was ask the experts on how to deploy a Python app to Azure Container Apps. So check that out. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but it sounds like it's pretty useful. And then here's a blog post on how to use Azure Policy for Azure Container Apps. So there's a lot of details that Paulo has put in here about how to use Azure Policy with container apps. And then here's another blog post on how to simplify deploying to container apps, but using Azure Arc and in an Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster, using the AZ Container App command. So the up command has been around for a little bit, and you can deploy to a like I guess a standard container app environment. But now you can also use it to deploy to an Azure Arc-enabled container app environment. And lastly, Dennis has a great blog post on how to run container apps at scale. I think he touches on a lot of things, including some of the announcements that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Cool. So those are all the community highlights. Anything anyone wants to kind of mention here before I move on to product updates?
No, that was great. I will say I read Dennis's article, and that was not. These are all great, but just last night I read Dennis's article, and that was really interesting. So definitely recommend that one along with all the other ones.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for putting that together, Dennis. All right, so let's go through some product news. We announced a bunch of stuff this past month. Some of them we actually didn't quite announce. We're announcing it here. So I'll go through them. So first is the new pricing plan and enhanced networking that Mike and Carrie are going to talk about later. And that's in public preview. We have a couple things that made it to GA this past month. One is the Azure Monitor integration that we looked at last month, as well as the ability to mount Azure files and ephemeral storage in container apps.
Hey, Anthony.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, excuse me, on the Azure Monitor integration, just to make sure everyone understands what that provides is previously all of your logs could only go to Log Analytics workspace. So now you have the option for at the environment level that you can actually decide to use Azure Monitor instead of Azure Log Analytics. And then once you do that, you can create one or more diagnostic settings so that you can send your logs and metrics to different locations like Azure Storage, to an Event Hub, and there's some partner solutions that you can leverage there also. So it gives you a lot of flexibility on where you want to send your logs and metrics. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And then a couple of things went into public preview. So first is session affinity or sticky sessions. So now for a single revision Azure Container App, you can enable session affinity. So if your application requires like all traffic from a single client, in this case a browser, to be all routed to the same replica, you can now just with the checkbox in the portal turn that on, and you'll have it. So this is really useful for things like Blazor Server, which requires you to route back to the same circuit, which lives on the single replica. So you can do that now. As well, we also released in public preview Azure Key Vault references for container apps. So, and this is in container app secrets. So when you go to a secret in container apps, you can, in addition to being able to supply the value of the secret, you can choose to now reference a value in Key Vault. And Azure Container Apps is going to use the managed identity that you've specified to talk to Key Vault and pull that value from Key Vault. And we're going to keep monitoring Key Vault on a regular basis. So if you update that secret, that value will flow into container apps, and any container app revisions that rely on that secret as an environment variable will be automatically restarted when that happens. So that makes it really easy to rotate your secrets. Or you can actually, if you want to rotate your secrets manually, you can actually specify the full version URL to your Key Vault secret. And that allows you to say that I want to get my value from that exact version of my Key Vault secret. And then if you create a new version of the secret in Key Vault, you can go over to your container app when you're ready and change your secret to reference the new variable, or the new version of the secret. So you have a lot of control there, or you can just let the platform do the updating. Either of those work great. So check that out. And a small one, but kind of an important one, is that you can now see the Quota and Dapper versions that are currently running in your container app environment by going to your container app environment and in the portal and seeing it in the overview page up top. And also another one that we recently did is so for a while there, when you needed to make a call from one app to another within a container app environment, you would either have to go directly at, like, basically use the app's FQDN, its fully qualified domain name, which is pretty long. You have to kind of figure out how to get that information. Or you can turn on Dapper and use Dapper service invocation. But some folks are kind of used to just using the app name to call another app. So we've made that happen. So you can now, for an HTTP enabled app, you can now make calls from one container app to another by just going to http://app name at port 80, and that will get routed to your app. So that's pretty cool. And I know we have one more that we want to talk about, which is Quota. So I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Yeah, sorry. We'll update the blog post with this also. I got it to Anthony a little late for this morning, but yeah, we have made some Quota updates recently. Actually, a few weeks or maybe even a month ago, we actually took the limit on how many apps you can have in an environment. So we've gotten rid of that, so you can put as many apps in a single environment as you want. We've also made it so the revisions used to be limited to 30. And through the CLI and I believe ARM, you can actually go up to many more replicas. And soon in the portal, you'll actually be able to set it up to, I think we're going to limit in the portal to 300, which is a pretty large number, to be honest. But basically, you can have almost as many revisions per app as you want also. And you know what? That's a typo, and I apologize. That's my typo. That should say replicas. Revisions, you're actually still limited to 100. So I'll fix that. I apologize. That's the number of replicas that you can have. So a revision can have 300 replicas. I said that wrong. And then lastly, another thing that a lot of people have asked for is folks that are really using container apps to scale fairly large is we're going to raise the total core limit. So the number of cores across the entire environment to 100 by default. And that's not quite all the way rolled out. If you were to create a new environment in many of the regions that we support, you would actually have this limit. But within the next week or so, all of the regions will support this. And then we'll go through and actually update all of your existing environments to also have 100 core limit. So that's something that a lot of folks have asked for, and you will have that very soon. All right, so let's jump to kind of Carrie and I have some big news around. I'm going to go ahead and march that forward. One of the big things that we went public preview with on Wednesday was a new ACA plan structure. So in Azure Container Apps, we now have this new plan, a plan structure, which we call consumption with dedicated workload profiles. You'll also see us often just short name it to consumption plus dedicated. And we're going to do a demo, so don't worry about all these words. I'm going to go through all of this in a quick demo up in the portal, just to give you a visual, which can sometimes be a lot easier to grok. But what's really cool is you can use the consumption plan that we're used to today with our per app billing model, which can scale to 0 and all that. You still have that, but in the same environment, the same ACA environment, you also have what we call the dedicated plan. And this really allows developers to leverage different types of compute. So with the dedicated plan, to start with, we're going to have general purpose, but much larger general purpose, as well as much larger memory optimized, what we call workload profiles. And those workload profiles, they're basically representing the underlying customized compute that you can leverage. And again, I'm going to show you this, so it's going to make a lot more sense when I show you some visuals. The billing model for the workload profiles is a little different. Rather than per app, you're actually going to be billed for the entire node or instance, which under the covers somewhere there's a VM running, right? So we're going to bill you for all that memory and all of that CPU, but you can put as many apps into that instance as you want. I'm going to stop there because I think when I show you in the portal, it's going to make a lot more sense. We can always come back to these slides and reference them. And this is kind of a conceptual or logical way to think of these workload profiles. So inside an environment, you can have one or more workload profiles. Again, by default, you'll always have a consumption workload profile that you can choose to use, just like today, same billing model, same everything, except for you're going to get some cool stuff that Carrie's about to mention on top of that consumption. And then in addition, you can optionally create one or more dedicated workload profiles. And then within each workload profile, that profile itself can scale and add instances if you start throwing a ton of apps into that workload profile. So again, just kind of a logical here. We'll show you in the portal, and I hope that makes a lot more sense in a minute. But I'm going to go to one more slide just to talk about the cool networking stuff that Carrie and team have created.
Yep, thanks, Mike. So really quickly, Mike already mentioned that you're getting a lot of other really cool stuff on top of this consumption dedicated plan structure. And a lot of that stuff is networking enhancements. So all these features are available both for the consumption plan and a dedicated plan within the consumption dedicated plan structure. And we'll really quickly go through all these, and we'll show these all in a demo as well in a second. So first one here is reduced subnet size requirements. So now the minimum required subnet size is /27. Previously, the requirement was /23. And that's a lot of IP addresses you have to allocate for your container app environment. Yeah. And we've heard you loud and clear. So we're reducing that requirement, bringing it down. In addition, we provide additional capabilities to fully lock down your container app environment, and especially the outbound egress traffic. So we now support user-defined routes in the consumption dedicated plan structure. And along with user-defined routes, you get a lot of really cool things, such as Azure Firewall and other third-party network appliances you want to be using. Finally, we also support NAT Gateway, and you can get a static IP address in the new consumption dedicated plan structure. So what all this does, though, is it tells a really cool story in that you can now fully control both the inbound and the outbound traffic for your container app environments, right? So you can use an application gateway, which you could do on a previous existing plan as well, but you can use that to control the ingress traffic coming in. And then you can also now use UDR and firewall to really control where your outbound traffic is going. With that, I think, Mike, we're going to go to demos now.
Yeah, and thanks, Carrie. And I just want to say these are two of the most asked for features that we've had for Azure Container Apps since we went GA. So it's great to have these. So thanks, Carrie and team. Obviously, we have an amazing developer team and a few other PMs on our team that made all of this happen. It's been a lot of work, and it's great. So thanks, Carrie. And yeah, now we're going to jump to demos. So let me switch over to my other screen. I have too many screens open. I knew this was going to confuse me. All right, so we'll go to this one here, and we'll go to the portal here. So Anthony, I don't know how my font's looking, but if you want to put maybe just my head, and so we have the full screen, it's up to you, partner. You don't even have to show my face because it's not necessary, but whatever you want. All right, so here we are in the portal. I actually have a lot of resources. I was just going to show you. This is where I was going to start. Yeah, so here I have a few container app environments. You'll actually see that this is an environment, this music environment at the bottom. And another thing, Anthony, is I can't really look over at the screen over here to see questions. So feel free to interrupt me if you'd like. If anybody has a question, it's probably easier to answer them as we go.
Yep, sounds good.
Thanks, partner. So anyways, yeah, I have a consumption-only environment that I created, probably months ago. But here's a couple of new environments using that new plan structure that we talked about, the consumption plus dedicated. And I created one here called ACA Live. I did that so I can speed up the demo a little bit because it can take a few minutes to create a new environment. But I want to walk you through the process of what that looks like to create that new environment. So here I'm going to go kind of the long way just to show you. You can go new, you can click containers. I'm going to create a new container app. In the portal, you create that new environment along with your first app. If you're using the CLI or ARM or Bicep, you can create a standalone environment with no apps and then add apps to it. So here's our portal experience. Let's go ahead, and this is what I did last night, and we'll just call this app 2. And you can see here that I have some environments already in East US 2. I'm actually going to switch to East US. Our new public preview is available in 4 regions, with East US being one of them. I'm not going to rattle off the other 3 because they're not popping to my head, but I believe it's West. I'm not going to try. But we have 4 environments or 4 regions that we support right now. So in East US, you can see I have a couple of dedicated consumption plans, but we're going to click Create New to pretend or go through the steps. I have to give my environment a name, so we'll call it, let's do ACA Live Today. And here's what's the biggest thing that's new on this page is you'll see here we have 2 plans now. I can choose, which is the default, to go ahead and stick with the consumption plan, or I can use the new consumption and dedicated plan, which allows me to use kind of in that one plan structure, I can use both the consumption and the dedicated. So let's get into that a little more. I'm going to go ahead and choose that. And when I do, you'll notice up here on top that a new tab shows up called Workload Profiles. So we'll go ahead and choose that, and I'll click on Workload Profiles here. So as I mentioned, by default, you're going to get a consumption workload profile, and there that is. You get that for free. You get that by default. You can't delete it right now. You don't have to use it. It doesn't cost you a penny if you don't use it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one of our dedicated workload profiles that I talked about. And so I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to go ahead and call this, well, before we name it, actually, sometimes it's easier to go choose the size. So I'm going to click on choose size. I'll put my resolution back. Oh, that's good. And you'll see here's the sizes that we support today. We have 3 different sizes of general purpose T-series VMs under the covers. And you can see that they have significantly more CPU and memory. You can use up to 16 CPUs and 64 gig of memory. And in our memory optimized sizes, you can use up to 128 gig of memory. So you can really fit those memory intensive workloads. Maybe you're loading a model or something. And this makes it really easy to pick the right hardware or compute for each application within an environment. So you might use consumption for things that scale to, for apps that scale to 0 a lot, for things that are running more significant amounts of time. This is probably what you might want to choose, say, a memory optimized. So anyways, let's go ahead and choose, let's go with a D4, and I'll go ahead and select that. And now I'll give it a name. We'll call this our live D4. And this is kind of a friendly name that you'll refer to whenever you're dealing with one of the workload profiles that you've added to an environment. The other thing I get to choose is how does this workload profile scale? So I'm going to put lots of apps into this workload profile if I want. I can put one giant one. But since I have 3 instances that I'm going to say is my minimum, I'm going to be billed for those 3 instances. Again, we show you the price right here. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. You can see this is my monthly price for 1 instance. So I'm going to be paying for 3 of these. But you can imagine how many apps I can put into 12 CPUs and what is that, 48 gigs of memory. That's a lot of apps, very likely. Or a few apps that are going to scale. Well, if you put more apps in there, or that app scales even bigger, I'll actually, by setting this to 5 as my maximum instance count, will allow this workload profile to scale up to 5 instances. Today, I can take that as far as to 20. You do need to do the math here. If I'm saying 20, if it's 4 CPUs, that's great. That keeps me under that 100 total. Remember, I have 100 total for the environment. I believe we're about to raise that to 200 for dedicated workload profiles, but I believe it's 100 right now. Soon, I believe it'll go to 200, which means across all your dedicated workload profiles, by default, you can use up to 200 cores. Whereas over in the consumption, which is there by default, you can go up to 100 cores. So we're really giving you a lot more flexibility here. Okay, so let's keep that back at our default. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go ahead and click Add. And so now you'll see we have a dedicated workload profile that we've added to this environment. Now, you don't need to worry about adding them all right now if you don't know or want. You can do this after the fact, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then from there, everything's pretty much as it was before. I won't go into this. Carrie will touch on that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create this. My other screen's in my way, sorry. And then if I wanted to actually create this, I could just hit the review and create. But what we now get to do is define the app. So we've defined our environment with the dedicated workload profiles. Now I can come in here and I can define my actual app settings. By default, we use the quick start image just like before. I'm going to actually go back to normal font. There we go. And you'll see here that if you don't change anything, you're going to get the quick start image in the consumption plan with a fairly minimal number of cores in memory, just like before. But when you unclick this, this is where it gets kind of cool. Of course, here you're going to go set your image, register your image, and pick a tag. I'm just going to pick these to fill them in. This is where it gets fun, though, is now you'll see in the drop down here for workload profile, I can choose to put this into that consumption workload profile. It's just like today's consumption. Again, it can scale 0. You're only paying for resources when they're running. We have the concept of scaling to idle. It's just like it is today. But one nice thing is you'll see when I do choose consumption, I actually can go up to 4 CPUs and 8 gig of memory in that same consumption plan with the same billing model. So that's really cool. But I can also choose, remember that workload profile I added, that dedicated one, I can add that, and now I get these sliders. And in any 0.1 increment I want, I can choose how much CPU and memory. So if I want 2.5 CPU, and again, the max, remember, for this workload profile, for any single instance, 4 CPUs, so I can go all the way up to 4 if I want. And the max memory is 16. So if I need a ton of memory for this app, I can do that. That's pretty awesome. It gives you a lot more fine gain control. Again, so as developers, you can choose what that compute looks like under the covers for your app to run on. Great for microservices, where each service might be on a different stack or have different needs for running. So this is really great. And then the rest is as it is today. I can turn ingress on for this and so on and so forth. And then when I'm ready, I just hit create. It does a little pre-validation. I got a red dot here. Why is that? It says that, I didn't fill in the ingress here. Yeah, I need a port. There we go. But I'm not going to hit create because that'll take 2-3 minutes, sometimes even 4 minutes. What I have is pretty much a very similar environment that I created. So let's pretend I hit create. I created my new environment with my dedicated workload profile. I have one app deployed to that, kind of just went through that with the app settings. Let's take a peek at this. Okay, so we'll minimize that. Anthony, I'm going to pause there if you need to interrupt for any questions or comments and whatever.
Yep. So we have one question here about can you affect the pricing for workload profiles with either reserved instances or savings plans?
That's a great question. Literally yesterday we had a meeting inside the team. We are working on that. One or both of those. Actually, at first, one or the other should be available in the relatively near future. I can't commit to that because it hasn't been committed to. All I can say is we're actively working on that. So yes, great question.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we also have another question about zone redundancy. Is that available with workload profiles?
So it is not today. You may have noticed when I went. I'm not going to go back there, but yeah, you noticed that was grayed out. Well, now I have to. Now I'm almost all the way there. I just really feel committed. So if I go back and show you that screen when I created a new environment, which it's there we go. You'll notice that is grayed out when I do that. That is a point in time thing. Definitely for the dedicated workload profiles, we want to light that up because we know that's something people have asked for. But in general, yes, we want to light that up as soon as we can. So it's on our roadmap.
Okay, so that's great. Yeah. So while you were on that screen there, actually, it's gone now. So it sounds like basically when you selected the radio button for that second option, where
Yes.
you're so if you create your environments with this second option, you get all the stuff that Carrie mentioned earlier with the networking, and also the consumption plan now has a higher limit of 4 CPUs and 8 gigs.
Right.
And in addition to that, you can also opt into having additional workload profiles. Is that correct?
Exactly. And exactly, you nailed it. Kerry's going to do a demo here in a moment where he's going to show you some of those great features for networking. As he's already mentioned, it comes with smaller subnets, so you don't have to throw, I think it was 128 IPs at an environment. You can do much less now, as well as having the UDR support, the user-defined routes, and he'll show you all of that. But that is available to this new consumption plan inside of this this combo plan structure. So yeah, that is a good point to mention. So on the original consumption only, you don't have UDR support today. We're not ignoring you if you're using that plan. We are looking into supporting UDR there also, but today we don't. And then I wanted to mention something, Anthony. You brought up a good point. I can go here and add as many workload profiles as I want. So I just added one to that environment. I could add multiple, and in fact, multiple of the same one, as long as I just gave it a unique, friendly name up here. This is the workload profile. Oh, that wasn't the box I wanted. That wasn't the box I wanted either. All right, we're going to stop using this. There we go. But you can choose a workload profile name as long as it's unique. You can have as many as you want. All right, so back to and you'll interrupt me anytime, Anthony. Back to the environment I created last night. I actually named it very similarly. I think I created 2 workload profiles. Let's go here. And we have a new page to look at your workload profiles. So you'll see over here, I'm going to zoom in one more time and actually use the box correctly out. There we go. You'll see our new workload profiles navigation page over here. And when I click on that, it will go see you'll see the consumption workload profile, because that's built in. And then you'll see other dedicated workload profiles that I've added. So here you can see I've added 2. Even though in my demo a minute ago, I only added 1. Last night, I added 2 because I wanted to be able to show you that after you've created your environment, you can add more workload profiles. So you would come in here and you'd have the exact same UI that you had during the creation. And you could choose more workload profiles to add to this environment. So don't fear that you have to figure it out when you're creating that environment. You can also delete them. You'll notice this one has a checkbox. That's because there are no apps currently running in this workload profile, 0 here. And so because of that, I can delete it if I wanted to. I would check it, I'd hit delete, and I'd get rid of that workload profile. Because it is costing me money right now, even though there's no apps deployed. You're paying for 3 instances because that's my min. In fact, this case, min and max is set to 3. But I'm paying for 3 instances of this E8, which, it has a cost there. While I'm on that topic, actually, this isn't meant for production, but it's kind of cool. I'm going to raise the max up. You could actually make the min less than 3. We'll give you a warning saying this isn't recommended for production. Excuse me, I was thirsty there. It's good for dev test to allow you to control and save costs. You can even, this is really cool, you can even set that to 0. And if for a bit, for this workload profile, you have no apps deployed, after 5-10 minutes, it'll actually scale into 0, and then it won't cost you anything, which is pretty cool. Now, I will say, caveat there, when you're using any of the dedicated workload profiles, there is a very small cost for the management of the workload profile. So even though this will scale to 0 and have no cost, there's a small management fee. Now, if I deleted both of these dedicated ones, that would go away. So anyways, I won't make that change, but you can add, you can delete, you can change again, you can change your scrolling or your scaling whenever you want. So that's really cool. The other thing you can see here, and I already mentioned it, is the current number of instances that you're using in each workload profile. So this is what you're being billed for, whether there's no apps, 1 app, 20 apps in this workload profile. And as I showed you, you can reduce that, like in a dev test environment. It's not uncommon to just set it to 1 to 2, and then you'd only be billed for 1 or 2 instances. So you have a lot of control over how you want the scaling to happen. And then lastly, you can click here. You can see what apps are actually in that workload profile. And then I can go to that app, and just like normal, this is your same old Azure Container App, only it's running inside of a dedicated workload profile. So you'll remember that I can use a lot more memory or CPU. So last night I set this app to use a 1.5 CPU and 5 gigs of memory. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility. If I wanted to deploy another revision of this app, I could come in here to the container, and this is the same as what you see today. And I could actually bump this up to a much bigger number. I could say, I actually want 3 CPU, and I actually want to use like 10 gig, because maybe it's a fairly memory intensive thing. And I could save that, and I could click and redeploy a new revision with this larger amount of memory. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. All right, that's, I think, about it. So hopefully this has given you an idea for how to leverage the dedicated workload profiles, as well as take advantage of the consumption workload profile, all within a single environment. I think you'll find a lot of flexibility, a lot of cost control measures with the scaling that you can control. Carrie, I'm giving you like a 1-minute warning that I'm gonna turn over to you. We do have some new metrics. I just want to point out, if I go to that app, there are a couple new metrics, and I won't do a scaled demo right now, but we do have a new metric where you can actually see the number of cores your app's using. So if you look here, you have the reserved cores now, so I can see how many cores I'm actually using. So right now, that app, or a few minutes ago, that app scaled up to 1.5 cores, because that's what it's set to, is 1.5. If I scale this up, like if I added, a cool thing to do is if I added replicas here, as my replicas went up, you would see those cores count go up as well. Because for every 1 replica, which is red here, I'm requesting 1.5. So this is a new metric that I think is really handy, that I wanted to point out, especially when you're using these new dedicated workload profiles that do a lot of scaling.
Yeah, so we have a question here about metrics and how we can monitor usage over time of these workload profiles. I think this might answer it, but if it doesn't, please let us know.
So I think this would help from the app level. I think what you're asking is maybe more from the environment level, which is a great question, and it's something that has been talked about. It's whether we could have some metrics that are, I'm trying to go back there, at the environment level here. Can I see the scaling of this workload profile throughout time through a metric? And the answer is no, not using the built-in metrics here. So I guess that's the answer. Today, no. Although one way you could is, if you look at your bill, your bill's going to charge you more or less over time. But no, it's a great question. If that's something you'd like to see, create a new issue, if you would, on our GitHub repo, to let us know that you're interested in a feature like that.
Awesome. And we also have a question here about when the workload profiles will be rolled out to all the regions.
I don't have a crisp answer for that, but I can tell you, as the PM for this feature, I'm pushing hard for us to have a lot more regions available. We really just went live yesterday, so that's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's definitely something that we'll do sooner than later. But I don't have a timeline yet. Sorry.
All right.
Awesome.
And we have more questions, Mike.
Right. No, I'm sorry. Let's bring them.
Yeah, no worries. So scale to zero in the dedicated profile. Actually, I'm trying to understand. Can we scale to zero in the dedicated workload profile, or unless you explicitly specify the apps to use it?
So
And then
yes, so an app. In fact, here's that app. So this is my ACI. This is my live app one. Excuse me. That's running in my dedicated workload profile. I have it set for scale to zero. In fact, let's click on replicas. It looks like it has scaled to zero right now. So this app is scaled to zero, but that doesn't mean it's free necessarily, because remember, in the dedicated workload profiles, you're paying for the number of instances that you've set your min max to. So in this case, even though I have one app deployed to that environment, to that workload profile, and it is scaled to zero, I still have 3 instances. If you remember, if we go back to here, that's not where I wanted to go, but that's okay. If I go back to here and look at workload profiles, even though I have this app here, come on, you can do it. I have an app in this workload profile, but I have 3 current instances. So I'm paying for 3 of these at whatever their cost is per month. Of course, it's per second billing. So if I quickly went and did, this and hit save, that instances would go to 1. But yeah, you can scale to 0 the app, but it doesn't mean it's going to be free like in the consumption workload profile.
Okay, great. And then we have one more question here about the ability to configure affinity to nodes. So basically, like being able to make sure that your apps replicas are actually spread out amongst different nodes versus being deployed to the same one.
So that seems like there are a couple concepts in there. So it's definitely, if you're really worried about redundancy and having apps spread out, you'll want to have multiple replicas. But unless you're using the redundancy mode at the environment level, the zone redundancy, they're not necessarily going to be spread out across different zones. When you activate zone redundancy, which again isn't available yet for the new plan structure, but if you think about our consumption only plan today, when you activate zone redundancy for the environment, that's what's going to spread those out across different zones. Most Azure regions have 3 zones, and so it makes most sense to have at least 3 instances if redundancy is really important to you. And then what that's going to do in a zone redundant environment is spread those out 1 per zone. In our new plan, our new plan structure, we don't support zone redundancy yet, but it'll work the same way when we do. So I hope that's what you're looking for. If you were talking more about sticky sessions, then that's something you set on the ingress, and that doesn't change between the different plans. In fact, Anthony could probably answer that better. But if this ingress page would come up, which it's not for the moment for some reason, you would see that you could turn sticky sessions on if needed. All right. Oh, there it came back. Did you have anything more? I'm looking at the screen over here, reading that message. Okay, yeah.
Nope, I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, with that, thank you very much. With that, I'll turn it over to Carrie, and we'll do a quick switch of screens, and Carrie will walk you through the awesome new network features that we have. Do I need to tell a joke, Anthony, while you do that?
Yeah, tell a joke. I think we're ready, but now we need to hear it.
Well, yeah, I heard in the news yesterday that the Scarecrow got an award. What was the award for, Mike? Well, he was most outstanding in his field. Yeah. You're welcome. Yep. All right, Carrie, take it away fast, please.
Oh, you're muted, Terry. Carrie.
Yep.
Thank you. That would have been really awkward if I kept going. Okay, so thank you, Mike, for that great overview of consumption dedicated plan structure, the workload profiles that we have. So now I'm going to go into a bit more depth of networking features that we have with consumption and dedicated plan structure, as well as how you can fully lock down networking traffic now with this new plan structure. The demo that I'm about to show today and everything that's set up and showing everything that's working, I just want to point out that we do have everything documented. So we have 3 different how-tos here. So if you guys want to go try it out yourselves, we have one on how to create internal container app environment with workload profile structure, how to integrate with App Gateway, and then how to use UDR. The only one that is unique to the consumption dedicated plan structure is UDR and using it with firewall. Everything else you can do with the existing consumption plan as well. So we'll have that link in the show notes and everything, but that's there for you if you want to go try it out, provide feedback, let us know if things are working the way that you expect them to work, or if there's additional things we need to build for your scenarios. But with that, let's go into it. So here I have container app that I've created on the new consumption and dedicated plan structure. And the first thing I want to show you guys is the smaller subnet sizing that we now support. So with that, we have, for our container app is on container apps environment ACA demo env, which I have open over here. And you can see that the infrastructure subnet for this is infra subnet 27. So if we go to our subnets here, you can see that infra subnet 27 is in fact a /27 CIDR. So we support that smaller subnet sizing. Now, and sorry, just backing up a little bit. The scenario that we're running through today is fully locking down your traffic. So we're going to have an internal container app, so restricted to only the virtual network. We're going to have an application gateway controlling that ingress and UDR with firewall for that egress. So showing now the container app environment. The ingress here, you can see we have, as it's loading, we have that it's limited to the virtual network. And what this means is that anything that is outside virtual network can't talk to my container app right now. And my machine right now is not integrated with that virtual network. So if I go here to this application, you'll see that it is locked down, it is secure. I can't reach it as I'm not part of the virtual network. What we'll go to now is the application gateway. And application gateway is great with container apps in that we can integrate it with a virtual network so that it can still talk with a container app, and it can act as a load balancer and control traffic into our container app. So with this, we have more flexibility with that ingress control for our container apps. And just really quickly showing that we are integrated with our container app that we just showed. ACA networking demo app. So that was our container app over here. So we do have that as a target backend. That means that application gateway can send traffic to that container app. And what we have here is the front-end public IP address, which we've also configured with a custom domain so that we can access our container app. So from the public, we can still access our container app. And if we wanted to now, what we could do with this endpoint from our application gateway is we could lock this down even further. We could create something like a private endpoint to control that ingress traffic even more and have that private endpoint within our virtual network. So that's for the ingress. And then for egress, for outbound traffic. So what we're going to need to do is set up UDR with firewall. So here we have our firewall created, and it is created on an Azure Firewall subnet, which is within the same virtual network as our container app. And then we also have this firewall private IP here that we are then going to use a route table, so UDR, to point to. So you can see here that we've created this route within our route table that basically takes all our traffic and points it towards that Azure Firewall IP address. And we've also associated this route table with a subnet for our container apps infrastructure. And then from there, we go and we create our firewall policies here. And this is basically our rules for our firewall to say, hey, what kind of traffic are we going to let out of our container app? What kind of outbound traffic can we have? So there's the key piece here is that there's two FQDNs that you're going to have to add. You can also use service tags if you would like. Data.mcr.microsoft.com and mcr.microsoft.com. And these are used by the Container Apps infrastructure. If you're using things like ACR, or if you want to use Docker, there's additional FQDNs that you're going to want to add as well. We have that all documented within our documentation. But what's really neat about this, and we're going to show how this works now, is we can go to our Container App console. And what we're going to try and do is reach out to a few different endpoints externally. And you're going to see that the firewall is going to let some of that traffic through, and some of it it's going to block. And the traffic that's letting through is the addresses that are listed in the FQDNs here. So if this wants to load, there we go. So we're going to run 2 curl commands here. So the first one we're going to run is to a website that is going to be blocked by our firewall. So we have a sample site here. And when we curl it, you can see that we get no response from the curl request. And that's because this is being blocked by our firewall. Now we can run another curl request here, curl command. And this is going to be to mcr.microsoft.com, which is allowed by our firewall. And you're going to see here that we do get a response back. And just really quickly for sanity checks, mcr.microsoft.com, it's a site, and the sample site as well. You can see here that it does. It is a live site and has or should have a response. So that's basically showing the fully locked down container app and container app environment. So just reiterating again, if you want to do this, you want to have your container app created, set to have ingress to only the virtual network. That way, there are no public endpoints from your container app in the container app environment. All traffic is routed to the virtual network. Ingress traffic, you can set up an application gateway in front of your container app. And that way, all inbound traffic is going to have to go through that app gateway before it can reach your container app. And then you can also set a firewall for that outbound traffic to control what your container app can reach out to externally. But that's it. So
wow, that's awesome, Anthony. Kerry. That's really awesome. I mean, being able to lock down that environment is great. Super great.
Yeah, that's awesome. It doesn't look like we have any more questions here, though. So yeah, just to summarize,
everybody understood all that network stuff that Kerry just was talking about. That's amazing.
Yeah, super clear. I mean, I heard the words. I'm not sure if I understood it all, but
I feel like I'm a network expert now. Thanks, Kerry.
Yep, exactly. All right, so to summarize, by basically changing the clicking that second option when you create an environment, you're opting into all the features that Kerry told us all about. Bigger CPU and memory for the consumption plan. You kind of basically get like the same consumption plan as you do today, and then also you have access to the workload profiles that Mike was showing us. That's pretty amazing. So so without more questions, I think we can pretty much call it here. And yeah, we're going to be back in a few weeks. This webcast or this live stream in April was actually delayed a week or two. So our next one is actually going to come up in about 2.5 weeks or so. So you're going to be seeing us again really soon, I think in the first week of May. So yeah, so thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Mike and Kerry, for showing us all this cool stuff. We can't wait for you all to try it out. Until next time, thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, folks. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you.